Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning back in again this week. My name is O.Hossack. I'm a agriculture education instructor and FFA advisor here at Sequoyah Public Schools. Housekeeping thing before we get going. They're doing a kind of a live chat on the YouTube link. So if you go to RSU TV, their YouTube channel would be on there. Just think of it kind of like a little conversation, and let the conversation begin on there. Today we're going to be talking. This is actually perfect. This is kind of how worlds can collide sometimes. Ms. Helbig just taught you some things about some deviled eggs and finished up with an omelet. Well, ironically, without either one of us actually communicating, we're going to talk about eggs. And so it's perfect, right? And so she told you how to make them delicious. I'm going to tell you how they get to your house. And hopefully it's exciting. Moving on. Okay. So egg production in the United States, when you look at the actual numbers, they can be quite astonishing. So 99.1 billion eggs were produced in the United States in 2019. So that is a ton. That is a ton of eggs. But if you think about it, supermarkets across the store or across the nation, right, or any other kind of store that carries eggs seems to always have them, and they have a bunch, right? And so the consumer demand for eggs is quite large, and we use them in a wide variety of products, whether that's any of those things Ms. Helbig just talked about or others. They're definitely a staple food in the United States. The top 10 states as far as number of laying hens, so that is hens that are actually going to produce eggs. Oklahoma is not one of them, but we're surrounded by number 9 and number 5, 9 in Arkansas, 5 in Texas. And then you can kind of see on the map there some of those other states. Iowa, the number one egg producer as far as number of eggs produced, right there. Okay. Hens become mature enough to lay an egg about 6 months of age, and so that can be give or take a couple weeks, depending on the breed, depending on the environmental conditions, so time of year, their diet, those kinds of things. But usually around 6 months is when they're going to start laying. And those first couple of eggs are going to be abnormal. So basically, the chicken's body is learning how to produce an egg and how to go through that process. A typical hen will lay about one egg every 24 hours and will occasionally skip a day. Okay. As time has gone on through the genetic improvement of laying chickens, okay, we have increased the number of eggs per year that they can produce. So in the early 1900s, a average layer would lay about 120 eggs or one egg every 3 days. And so now currently, right, an average hen will lay about 300 eggs per year, which comes out to 1.21 per day, right? So 365 days in a year. We're basically looking at an egg per day, give or take. Our wonderful friends at Purina put out this graphic. Basically, if there is,
what chicken breed produces the most eggs?
No idea. You tell me.
I don't know.
Okay, I don't either. The question was, what chicken breed produces the most eggs? I have no idea. Google it. But some tips for to have a productive chicken is basically going to come with a complete feed. So they're getting all the essential vitamins, minerals, proteins, and things that their body needs to be able to have the egg white form and the shell and the membranes and all those other fun parts of an egg that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And then a lot of egg production is light is a large factor in that. So the amount of light that chicken is exposed to per day can also determine how productive they are. Okay, so here's just kind of the general process. Okay, so we have this whole thing starts with the chicken laying an egg, right? Which, who came first? I don't know. So the chicken lays an egg. It's then collected. They're then inspected and packaged. So they're sorted based on grade and size, and we're going to talk about that here in a second, as well as some things you can kind of do at home to see. Then they're going to be washed and sanitized with water about 115 to 120 degrees. They have like these little soft brushes that can help remove material that you wouldn't want on the shell. So that way when you open your carton of eggs in the store to check them before you go up to the cash register, because if you don't, then you get home and you have a bunch of cracked eggs and then your wife yells at you. But then they're washed and then they're transported throughout the United States. And so typically an egg that you get from the supermarket, if you can find them at this time of year or in this situation, was usually laid a week to a week and a half ago. And so keeping them fresh is something that's important to prevent things like spoilage, but also disease and things like that. And so an egg, if you look on your package, okay, this is a extra large egg, grade A from Wally World. It says right here, keep refrigerated at or below 45 degrees. And that 45 degree temperature is kind of the magic mark for those eggs to have longevity as far as storage is concerned. So when they're shipped out on refrigerated trucks, they're kept well below that 45 degree mark. Okay, so if you've ever looked at a carton of eggs, and so on this one, see, Chris, is that seeable? It's like right here. That says grade A eggs, and there's this cool little logo that kind of looks like like a highway or an interstate sign. And that basically is a grade that the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, will assign to basically the quality of what is inside of the shell will be determined. Okay, and so we can have AA, which is the best. We have a grade A, okay, which is in the middle, and then we have B. So B being the lowest grade of egg, that's going to be they're going to be the least desirable for consumers. They're going to be the least attractive. Kind of sounds weird to say about an egg, but it would be. You're going to have things like cracks in the shell. You could have yolks are going to be kind of wide and flat, or maybe real runny or not fully formed. And then as we go up the scale, those things won't happen, right? You'll have a high firm yolk. You'll have your egg whites are going to be intact, and then as we go up to grade AA, that's basically a pristine egg. So usually there's a cost difference. Okay, so between these, so a dozen of grade B eggs is going to cost less than A or even a AA. Okay, so A is definitely adequate for cooking and all those things. That's usually what we end up with, and that's where the majority of eggs produced are going to fall in that grade A. Okay, the other way they're classified is by their size, and so it's not the actual size of the egg itself, but it's going to be the weight per dozen. So there's 12. A dozen is 12. Okay, so in a group of 12 eggs, how much do they weigh will determine how they're labeled. And so on our carton again, right, we can see these right here. So this was an 18. There was 18 eggs in this particular packaging, but over here it says extra large white. So 12 eggs out of this carton should weigh approximately 27 ounces, and that is what we're going to test here today on our magic scale. And so if you read it on here, it says the net weight is 40.5 ounces. So basically, if we took, if we do the math, so if we decide or divide 27 by a dozen or 12, right? Each egg should weigh roughly 2.25 ounces. So if we just increase that to 18 eggs, then we'll be right at 40.5. And so when these are weighed, they're not actually USDA certified, right? So the producers and the packagers that are going to put them all together are actually on the hook for making sure that the information that they put on their packaging or their egg carton is accurate. Okay, and so we just have, I got 12 eggs here. There's 2, 4, 6, and I did something wrong, right? Forgot to tear off the weight of the bowl. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And what do you know? We're at 27.2 ounces. So we're right on that extra large, labeling. So shout out to Great Value Eggs for packaging appropriately and correctly. So if you're looking at a recipe, and it says 2 eggs, okay, most of the time that is going off of using a large egg. So instead of 2 2.25 ounces, right, that may be closer to 2 ounces or a little bit less. So depending on variance or how specific that recipe needs to be, if you use an egg out of a jumbo carton or out of a small carton, your recipe could be off, right? Your results could vary could vary on that recipe. It's important to know that not all the eggs will be the exact same size, but they're going to be close. So within our carton of eggs, there may be some variance. So we may have some that are 2.5 ounces. We may have one that's 2 ounces. But when it's all put together, the aggregate of that will be around 27 ounces. Okay, so if you've ever cracked an egg, right, usually you look and you say, okay, we've got the shell, we've got the egg white, and then we've got the yolk, right, the big yellow thing, the globe that's kind of floating in there. Those are kind of the 3 that we typically think of, but there's actually a bunch of different components, okay, to the egg itself that all serve an essential form and function. I think this is an important time to talk about the fact that the eggs that you get from a grocery store are not fertilized. So you're not going to crack open an egg. There's not going to be like a little chick in there. They're all unfertilized, but it has all of the components inside of the egg to where if there was a growing and developing embryo, it would have all the things that it needs to survive, right? And so birds, reptiles lay eggs, right? Mammals don't, right? So mammals have all the things inside of the female animal that that embryo needs to grow and develop. Whereas if you think about this as like a portable mom, right? It's got all of the things inside of there that the embryo is going to need to survive, grow, and develop. And then whenever it hatches, right, can be a live chicken running around or bird or whatever it might be. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about is the shell. Okay, the shell is its main purpose. Okay, is to protect, right, the contents that are inside of the egg. Think of it like wearing a helmet whenever you're riding a bicycle or skateboarding or whatever it is you do to constitute wearing a helmet. It provides protection from impacts. However, it is not a solid sheet that surrounds it. It's porous, and it's going to allow gas exchange and moisture to kind of pass through in different at different parts of it. Okay, and so one cool thing you can do at home, you can go touch all the eggs before you use them for cooking. It's called candling, and candling is basically the process of holding a light up under an egg. And you can observe a couple of different things inside of the egg to determine quality as well as the condition that the hen was in whenever she laid the egg. Okay, so we're going to try to do this on camera. It may turn out to be a little wonky, but we'll see. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm getting my flashlight out, and Miss Bacon is going to so kindly turn the light off. Okay. Chris, are we in kind of frame here? Right here? Yep. Okay, so if we take our light on our iPhone 6000 here, we can we can hold it up under the egg, and we can see all of those pores in the eggshell. And so that's called mottling. And depending on the amount of mottling will determine a couple of different things. It can be the structural integrity of the egg, and how that's caused is by the diet of the hen. So there's a protein matrix that holds all the calcium within the shell together. And so if the hen is not getting enough protein, I should have definitely cut my nails before I did this. That's some little behind the curtain stuff there. But if she didn't have enough protein in her diet, okay, this egg can be a little bit more porous. And so as the screen comes back on here in a second, we can see a graphic of different stages of modeling. So the one we did, just kind of comparing, right, would be somewhere right here. Okay, 4 on this side, and we can turn the big light back on. We'll turn them off here again in a second when we talk about the air cell. Hopefully, if we have time. The lesser amount of those little porous spots, okay, those thin spots in the shell, the better. So you could tell this hen over here was probably on a complete feed, had all the things that she needed to really produce a good shell, right? Whereas this one over here on this side, where it kind of looks like the sun, really. That hen may not have had adequate nutrition, but her body was still continuing to lay eggs, and so that shell, right, may be a little thinner than some over here. And again, it's kind of a progressive thing, and it's not to say that these eggs are necessarily bad. They're just more susceptible to. Thank you, Brody, for that text. I should have turned my watch off before this. That hen may have some nutritional deficiencies as compared to these two, and that's something you can try at home and can kind of categorize where your eggs are at. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to crack an egg. Okay, I'm going to try not to make a mess. So inside of the shell are going to be 2 membranes, and what those membranes do is basically act as a sealer or a barrier from the outside world to the inner parts of the egg. I'm going to try to peel this carefully. And so, is that in frame right there, Chris? Okay. So if I take one of these little pieces here, I can start to peel this, and inside, right, is going to be the membrane. So there's an inner and an outer membrane. They're stuck together, and without different equipment than my fingernail, we wouldn't be able to pull them apart. But this membrane, the purpose is basically to keep things like bacteria out from the inside of the egg. Fun fact, way back in the day, these could be used as bandages because of their ability not to let bacteria and other things get through. And so I don't recommend next time you cut yourself to go crack an egg and put the membrane on there. That's like some way back in the day kind of stuff. And we only have about 6 minutes left, so we're going to have to kind of hurry here. Okay, another part of the egg is going to be the air cell. And so inside of that membrane, there's going to be a small pocket of air. And what that acts is basically like an airbag to protect the egg from the embryo inside of it, to protect it from falling. And so, Jennifer, if we can hit those lights one more time. This is another thing by candling that you can see. Hopefully, you see that there, Chris, where the colors change right there at the very bottom? Okay, so that white part right at the very bottom of the egg is going to be the air cell, and we can see how it's a lot lighter, and then as it gets as we go up the egg, right, it becomes kind of a yellowish color. That white part down at the bottom is going to be the air cell, okay? And so think about that like Jennifer, you can turn the light back on. Not to boss you around, but that's going to protect the egg from falls and collisions. And so how that's created is there's a temperature differential inside of the hen versus the outside environment. And so when that egg falls out, there's some physics that happen, and air basically gets pulled in really fast, and it creates that pocket. Okay, so the albumin, or you probably call it the egg white, also consists of some different layers, but for our purposes here, we're going to talk just about it as one. And so that's going to be the liquid medium that the embryo, okay, is going to develop in. It's going to be high in protein. Think about it like what's a good analogy? You know, like you have the little balls with the squishy, squish them and like the little eyeballs pop out. Well, that little gel that's inside of there basically acts as a padding, similar thing that's happening here inside of the egg itself. That was a horrible analogy, but okay. So it's basically a liquid that's going to protect the growing embryo. So I'm going to kind of spoil Miss Helbig's "you can't unscramble an egg" question. And so because this is made up of protein, whenever it gets heated up, so you crack it, you put it in a skillet, and it starts to get hot, right? What that's called is denaturing. And as those proteins denature, their structure, right, which is usually kind of organized, just freaks out and starts making all these random bonds everywhere else. And so through that process, basically you can't then undo that process. So you can't essentially unscramble an egg. So don't tell her I told you that, and you get your bonus points. Okay. All right. So the yolk is the big yellowish, orangish globe, right? Structure that is going to be in the middle of the egg itself. Okay. And that's going to be the source of food for the embryo. And it's going to contain mostly fats, right? So fat is high energy. So as that embryo is developing and forming things like organs that it needs to survive and all the essential physiological structures, okay, it's going to rely on that source of fat to grow and develop. And that's why if you had a fertilized egg with an embryo in it and it was closer to hatching and you cracked it, right, you wouldn't see this big orangish yellow globe, right, because it's being consumed. Okay, so the chalaza is kind of hard to see. If we look at our fantastic egg here, as I go up and I try to tilt without spilling an egg on Mr. Osborne. We're good there?
Yeah.
Okay, so this white, almost hair-like structure right here is going to be the chalaza, and what that the purpose of that is to basically keep that yolk suspended in the middle of the egg. And so if you think about if you had a soccer ball with two bungee cords, one going out of the North Pole, one going to the South Pole, and tied to the floor and the ceiling, right? Even if you hit that ball, right, it would kind of move back and forth, but it wouldn't go really up or really down, right? It would be kind of kept taut right in the middle, and that's the purpose. Okay, and it's basically just twisted strands of that albumin. Okay, this is going to be basically impossible to see on camera, so we're just going to talk about it on here, and even my picture on there is not really great. But if you look on the yolk, and if you try this at home, this is something you can definitely see, is if you look on the yolk, there's going to be a small, darkish disc, and what that's called is the germinal disc. And if I'm looking on here, there's kind of a whitish gray spot. You probably won't even be able to see it, but it's basically right here. Anyways, what happens is that is the location of fertilization. So if this egg was going to be fertilized, that is where both sets of genetic material would be located, and that's where the embryo would go from some cells and develop and become a baby chicken. Okay. That is the short and dirty of it. Was there any questions on there, guys? Next week, utilize that YouTube chat feature. Okay, we want to try to make this as interactive as we possibly can, and that is one good way to do this. Okay, I think since we have maybe a little bit extra time, Chris, let's try to adjust the camera right here. Okay, can you see the yolk?
Yeah. Is it on the far side? Yeah.
It is right there. So right here where my pointer 4000 is pointing here, this bendy straw, right there is going to be the germinal disc. Okay, there's going to be a kind of a solidified layer on the outside of the yolk that's going to contain kind of those fats and proteins. And so eggs are kind of a perfect food in the fact that they have proteins, they have fats, they have a lot of those things that people need and other animals need as well to be able to grow and develop. And so definitely try some of those recipes Miss Helbig was doing when she was cooking. The omelet smelled absolutely delicious. No more questions. Okay, guys, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, or because I know you just sit around and think about this 30 minutes with me all the time. It's owen.hossack@sequoiaeagles.net. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, sudden emotional outbursts, animal noises. I always say that in class, and the kids usually just somebody will make a sound. But hope everybody is doing all right. Wash your hands, and that's all I got. How much more time do we have?